Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Lakshmi Srinivas from Edureka. I welcome you to this 1 hour comprehensive session on project management tools and techniques. So some quick introduction about myself. I'll be hosting this session. So I have been working as a freelancer consultant and I'm a certified project management professional. I'm a PMP certified professional from PMI. I'm also an Agile certified practitioner. I'm a risk management professional and I'm also a program management professional. Right. So we'll spend some time looking at what is the core philosophy of project management, what are the various tools and techniques that are there as part of project management. When we talk about project management, we talk about managing projects. So primarily, right, three important aspects. We talk about people, right? We talk about technology, and we talk about process. Okay, so these are three important things that have to work in unison with each other. And as a project manager, you have to essentially ensure that you are able to manage all of them together very well. So some basic attributes of project management, right? So see, most importantly, before we start looking into the slides, all of us should have some good understanding about the discipline of project management, right? So here now primarily what happens is when we talk about a project, there are multiple attributes associated with the project, right? Taking this example. Now, this is 2022 has started, right? So we all have a goal of becoming PMP certified. So it's a very good thing, right? That's how we all should continuously believe in learning, and we should pick up the right skill, and we should keep abreast of things so that we are able to grow in our career. So the first important thing as we start talking about project management is you need to have a very good understanding about what is the goal of the project, right? What is the goal of the project and what are the objectives of the project? Okay, so these are two important things that we should understand. So primarily, how do we define a goal? If you look at in a layman's language, how do we define a goal? A goal is a short statement. Okay, it's relatively a short statement of a desired outcome to be accomplished over a long time frame. So which means it's a short statement of a desired outcome to be accomplished over a long time frame. Okay, over a stipulated period of time you intend to accomplish it. So usually 3 to 5 years. Some good examples. Now most importantly, what is the significant difference between a goal and objective? It's a broad statement that focuses on the desired results. It focuses on the results and does not describe the methods used to get the intended outcome. What is the method that is getting employed to obtain the goal is not provided in the goal statement. Okay, so a goal is a short statement of a desired outcome to be accomplished over a long time frame, right? Okay, now what are some good examples of goals? When we talk about business goals, some of the good examples could be you intend to maximize profits. Okay, you want to grow revenues. Okay, you want to increase efficiency. That's very important, right? In anything and everything that we do, it's important that we have to look at bringing in efficiency and effectiveness. Providing excellent customer service. Why should somebody come back to you, right? As a performing organization, why should somebody come back to you, right? Because it is our primary responsibility to create that customer delight, right? So you should be able to provide excellent customer service. Okay, you should be able to create a brand. These are some very good examples of goals, right? So primarily as seasoned project managers, it is very important that we have a good understanding about what is the difference between a goal and an object. That's the first important thing as part of managing projects. Then what are objectives? If you look at objectives are specific actionable targets that need to be achieved with a smaller time frame. Okay, they are specific actionable targets that need to be achieved within a smaller time frame. So if you look at objectives, describe the actions or activities involved in achieving a goal. So through objectives, we are going to achieve the goal. So what are the objectives here? A good example, handful of examples related to objectives, like increasing the company's market share to 7% by the end of next fiscal year, cutting down the operational cost by 10%, reducing the response time for sales inquiries to 12 hours by the end of this quarter. So it's going to be very objective in nature, right? And it helps you to align back to the goals of the project. Okay, so these are two important things that you should be aware of. All right, fine, fair enough. I hope this fairly gives us a good understanding about what is the difference between a goal and an objective related to a project. Now, what are the various attributes of a project, right? So when we talk about project management, you want to get certified, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. You want to get certified in 2022. So the goal is to become PMP certified. So what are the various attributes that come into picture? The first thing is there is a certain scope of work. And what is the scope of work? The scope of work is individually all of us want to get PMP certified. So we talk about what is the scope. Okay, then we talk about what is the next important thing. Do you want to do this for the rest of your life? No, right? We want to time box it, right? So we intend to accomplish this whole process once you join with us. See, primarily, right, it's a very simple aspect. We all know English, we all have access to internet, we know what is project management, but still you are looking forward to work with somebody primarily because they are certified, they are leaders in this specific area, they mentor you very well, and they ensure you in a 2 to 3 month time frame you are able to get certified, right? So that is very important. So that is why you start working with people who have a good name in the market, and most importantly who can provide good services and they are trustworthy, right? So coming back to our example, when we talk about project management, any goal that you intend to accomplish should be time boxed, right? So when we talk about time box, you want to complete your PMP examination in 2 to 3 months, so we talk about schedule. Okay, then the next important thing is, what is the next important thing? The next important thing is there is a certain amount of money that you will have to pay to PMI as an examination fees. There is a certain amount of money that you will have to pay to procure services from a third party. Okay, so we are going to work together. There is a formal registration process that you will have to complete. There is a eligibility criteria that you will have to meet, and most importantly, there is a certain onboarding process that you need to follow, right? So the third important element talks about cost, right? So this is very famously called the iron triangle of project management. When we talk about project management, three important things primarily come into picture. We talk about scope, we talk about schedule, and we talk about cost. Now all of us want to pass the examination with flying colors, right? So we talk about quality. Quality is one of the most important aspect, right? So end of the day, when we provide a specific service or when we talk about an application, a product, or an end result, it's equally very important that everything aligns to quality. Okay, quality could be doing it right the first time, quality could be fitness for use, quality could be meeting requirements, quality can be defect free. There are various definitions of quality. Relatively, it is our primary responsibility to understand, empathize with the customer, step into the shoes, understand what is their viewpoint about quality, and create that wow factor. So four attributes that we spoke about: scope, schedule, cost, and quality. Then what is the next thing that comes into picture? We talk about resources, right? So resources are a very important aspect. So end of the day, when you have to work on a project, you will need certain resources. These resources, they could be hardware resources, they could be software resources. Now today, because of this pandemic, okay, we are all learning from the same place we are sitting, and even after you complete the registration with us, learning becomes fun filled, primarily because we cater to your requirements of training on PMP. The sessions are conducted either through Monday through Friday, or we are available only if you feel that you will be able to only work towards the weekends. We are available on the weekends as well. So everything is customized. So the only thing is you will need a very stable internet connection, you will need a laptop, right? And these are called as resources. So as we start working on projects, you will need resources. They could be hardware resources, they could be software resources, they could be human resources, they could be infrastructure resources, or they could be any other kind of resources required for you to work on the project, right? So we talk about resources. Then we talk about stakeholders, right? So once you start working with PMI, who is the governing body here? It is, if you have to go back and look into the PMI website, this is the PMI website team, pmi.org organization, okay, based out of Newtown Square, Pennsylvania, United States of America. So they are your primary stakeholders because they are the people who are conducting this examination. if you hover around certifications, you will find the list of certifications that are there, the whole list of laundry list of certifications that are there, and we are going to focus primarily upon project management professional. Okay, so if you click on each of these links, it will directly take you to the landing page, and you can get more information pertaining to the credential. So primarily, what are we talking about? Why did we come this far? Because we are getting introduced to something called stakeholders, right? So end of the day, even as you want to get certified, probably you spoke to your line manager about this training program, and because end of the day, funding is very important, right? So you have to understand where is the fund going to come from. Okay, is it self-funded, or is your performing organization going to fund this project of passing PMP in the first attempt, right? So we talk about stakeholders. So stakeholder, you as an individual, because you have some interest in pursuing PMP, you are a stakeholder. PMI is a stakeholder, right? Your performing organization, your line manager, they are stakeholders. So stakeholders are very important people, and you will have to appropriately identify who these stakeholders are and how are we most importantly going to work with the stakeholders on the project. Then we talk about communication, right? So we talk about communication. So most importantly, what really ties all of us together? Communication is what ties all of us together. Communication plays a very important role in project management. So today, if there is anything that is tying both of us together, is one is we have a very stable internet connection, you have a platform, and we are able to communicate. So that's called communication. Okay, so communication plays a very important role, right? So as a project manager, you need to ensure that you are able to identify your stakeholders, and most importantly, you are able to communicate efficiently and effectively with all of your stakeholders. Right, so primarily, right, we talk about communication. So communication, as we discussed, your communication has to be efficient and it has to be effective. Okay, so when we talk about communication, your communication has to be both efficient and it has to be effective. Efficient is providing only the information that is required. Effective communication is providing the information in the right format at the right time to the right stake. Right, so that is very communication plays a very important role. Okay, then what is the next important element? We talk about procurement. What is procurement? You are procuring services from us, right? So you have decided that you want to pursue PMP, right? And you are going to procure certain services from Edureka, right? So that is called procurement. When we talk about procurement, sometimes in order to accomplish your goal and objective, you are going to procure certain services external of the organization, and that becomes the operational definition of procurement. When we talk about procurement, there is a buyer, okay, and there is a seller. Okay, the organization or party purchasing the goods or services, they become the buyer, and the organization or party providing the goods and services, they become the seller. So in this case, who is the buyer? You are the buyer and we are the seller. So both of us, we enter into some kind of agreement, okay, and we agree that once you enroll with us, once you provide the once you fill up the form, right, and we provide you good discounts on the training program. After this session, if you find us to be a valuable stakeholder, you can definitely enroll with us, and we get into an agreement, and we are going to provide you services on project management professional, right? So then what else do we talk about? One is scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, stakeholders, communication, procurement, and the most important thing, right? We talk about risk management. So in today's pandemic situation, right? So from the last 2 years, the situation has been far away from the normal way of life, and we are paying a very heavy price, right? In terms of frequent lockdowns, turbulence, there is no primarily, right, there is a lot of uncertainty in our lives, right? So in a similar way, when we talk about risk management, how are you going to gracefully deal with risks in the project, right? So what exactly is risk management, right? Primarily, right, when we talk about risk management, how are you going to deal with those uncertainties that are going to have an impact on your project? It could be a positive risk or it could be a negative risk. So how are you going to identify what are those risks? And most importantly, how are you going to prioritize those risks? And most importantly, what is your risk response plan? You are going to respond to a risk, right? So when we talk about risk management, when we talk about risk response, we will talk about something called avoid. We want to avoid the risk. You want to transfer the risk, right? You want to mitigate the risk. You want to accept the risk, and you want to, what's the last one? We talk about escalating the risk. Okay, so these are some important strategies that are there. Strategies too, we are going to respond to a risk. Similarly, when we talk about positive risk, we look at strategies. Okay, then what is the next element that we are going to talk about? Integration management. Okay, integration management. Integration management is rolling up everything so that everything works together like a well-oiled machine, and we are able to understand the length and breadth of project management. Right, so these are the various attributes related to project. Then we talk about something called process groups, right? What are those process groups? Projects, they should be formally initiated, right? They should be planned, they should be executed, they should be executed, they should be monitored and controlled, and they should be closed. We talk about closure, right? So this is typically the life cycle of a project, right? So we talk about initiation, we talk about planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. When we are a project manager, there is a greater degree of emphasis on planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So you have to plan for all these elements. You have to plan for scope, you have to plan for schedule, you have to plan for cost, you have to plan for quality, resources, stakeholders, communication, procurement, risk, right? All that, when you roll them up, it becomes the project management plan. Then execution is where you flip the plan into action. You start working with your teams, you start producing deliverables, you start talking about how do we communicate the overall health of the project to key stakeholders through weekly status reports, monthly status reports. Okay, all this has to be done here. We talk about how do we bring in quality assurance into picture, right? What are the various tools that you are going to use? All this is part of execution. Then we talk about monitoring and control. What is monitoring and control? Monitoring and control is what cannot be measured, cannot be controlled, right? So if you are a project manager, if somebody were to you meet somebody, a very senior stakeholder in an elevator, or you step into the boardroom, so nobody really has the time to sit and alongside understand what are you doing in the project, right? End of the day, you should be able to communicate in a very short span of time. You should be able to communicate what is the overall health of the project, right? When we talk about the overall health of the project, we talk about 3 status transitions. Is the overall health of the project, is it red, is it amber, or is it green, right? So this is going to define the overall health of the project. If you look at any status report, okay, I believe you're all practicing project managers, right? And in the world of project management, we talk about something called stoplight charts. Okay, stoplight charts. So what are stoplight charts? If you look into the status report of any project, the first thing is you will look at these three statuses. Is the overall health of the project, is it red, is it amber, or is it green? Green is a very happy status of affairs. Everything is well in the project. Everybody is happy. The customer is happy. Your leadership is happy. Your resources are happy. Okay, so you are making money in the project. Profitability is there. It's a very favorable status of affairs. But once you slowly move from green to amber and amber to red, this is where people come calling, and you have to justify why the health of the project is amber, why is it red, and most importantly, they are going to ask you three, what is your correction? Okay, what is your correction? What is your corrective? And what is your preventive action? Right? So, and they will ask you, what is your get well soon plan? What are you going to do to get well soon on the project? Okay, so that in terms of you are able to manage the schedule, manage the cost, manage the quality, and most importantly, stakeholder expectations. Okay, So these are all very important things, and all this will primarily roll into monitoring and control. What cannot be measured cannot be controlled. Then closure, all good things come to an end, right? So your project is over, you have learned a lot of lessons in the project, right? And you ramp down your teams, you hand over the deliverables, you raise invoices, you get paid for the service, you reach out to your stakeholders asking for feedback, you identify areas of improvement, right? There are many important things that you do as part of your closure, right? So these are all the various activities that come into picture when we talk about these two simple words, which is called project management. Okay, so I hope this part is clear to all of you. So people, process, and technology, right? So it's a very important aspect, right? When we talk about project management, we talk about these three important aspects. Okay, we talk about people, we talk about technology, and we talk about process. So here, if you look at team, technology is relatively dynamic, right? It is changing, it is rapidly changing. We talk about people, they come, they join the organization, and eventually if they don't, for various reasons, they tend to move to a different role, or they leave the organization. So primarily, right, I would say that these two elements are dynamic in nature. So primarily, right, it is, while we depend on people, it's equally important that we also define a process so that we are able to manage projects in a better way, right? So because we are talking about two dynamic elements, we are going to talk about something called a process. What is a process? Process defines a way of doing things, and if you do it in that way, there is a certain amount of consistency, repeatability, and predictability in whatever you do. So primarily, process plays a very important role, and it is trying to bridge the gap between two dynamic elements, which is technology and people. I don't want to trivialize the discussion saying that technology and people are not important, but process is one element which will ensure that you have a step-by-step way of defining things and doing things appropriately. Okay, so that's my take on project management. I hope this gives you that mile wide and inch deep knowledge. Now we'll start getting into the presentation quickly. So project management methodologies, we'll quickly talk about what are the various methodologies that are there. So we discussed, right? So what essentially is project management? So this is very clear to us now. So what is a methodology? A methodology, right? It is a system of practices, techniques and procedures and rules used by those who are involved in the project. So end of the day, when you start working with people, when you start working with technology, you need to have some process and methodology in place so that your activities are more controlled and understood, and you are not going to have any kind of unpleasant surprises at a later point in time. End of the day, because if you have to deliver, you have to deliver, and when you have to deliver, you have to deliver to the right stakeholder at the right time in the right quality. So that becomes very, very important. So when we talk about a methodology, it helps you to plan. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Okay, we talk about having a good work breakdown structure, hierarchical decomposition of all the work that needs to be done in a project. That's very important, right? End of the day, your approach has to be very structured. We talk about financial planning, what PMI expects all of us to do. Taking a quick side note here, team. So if you look at PMI expects us to demonstrate competency on three important aspects, which is called PMI talent triangle. Okay, so what is the PMI talent triangle? PMI expects that you are able to demonstrate competency in three important aspects. One is the technical project management. The second important thing is strategy and business management, and the third important thing is leadership. So if you are a project manager, you are expected to demonstrate competency on these three aspects. When we talk about strategy and business, are you able to play the role of an advisor, and most importantly, advise where the organization should invest their money, right? So that's very important. Are you able to grow the business? Are you able to run the business? Are you able to demonstrate leadership, work with teams, resolve conflicts, and get the job done? And are you able to, most importantly, look at all the key elements of project management that we discussed, right? In terms of attributes, scope, schedule, cost, quality, communication, risk, procurement, and integration. So these three play a very important role when we talk about project management. So are you able to play the role of an advisory? All this primarily it becomes very important. as we start getting into the thick of things. Work authorization is very important. It helps you to ensure that all the work that is being done is appropriately being planned and it is being implemented into the systems, right? So we have various methodologies. We'll talk about we'll do a high level overview about all this, but on the main examination we'll handpick the ones that are required, and the course content very clearly talks about one. We talk about predictive planning and we talk about agile, right? So we'll look at all this real quick in terms of what are the various methodologies that are there and how do you start using them, right? So traditional project management institute, agile, change management, process based and other methodologies. We'll quickly spend some time on this. So waterfall, we all know, right? Because this resembles a waterfall. This is very famously called the waterfall model. Comes with its own set of inherent advantages and disadvantages. If you go back to the previous slide, once all of your requirements are very clearly understood, only then you are able to move into the subsequent phases. So primarily the biggest problem here, I would still say that you can go ahead with a waterfall model. Still today, even today, in order to ensure that you have to work on projects, you can still go ahead with a waterfall model. Okay, it is still good, but the only prerequisite is your requirements have to be very clear, and usually you don't allow your requirements to change during the life cycle of a project, right? So that's the biggest problem that we have. So today, if you take a step back again and look at the Stacy diagram, right? The Stacy diagram, this will be a very important philosophy for us to handpick what is the appropriate methodology for the project, right? So we talk about two things. One is requirements, and the second thing is technology, right? So when requirements are close to agreement, and technology is close to certainty, you can employ a very simple model to work on your projects. But in this spectrum where we talk about complicated and complex decision making, where your requirements are not close to agreement, it is somewhere hovering between close to agreement, far from agreement, technology close to certainty, far from certainty. So this is where we talk about complex and complicated decision making. So this is where the philosophy of agile comes into picture, right? So you will have to there is no one size that fits all problems. Okay, it's very important that you take a step back, look at the business landscape, talk to your stakeholders, understand their requirements, and then determine the appropriate methodology for the project. Okay, so then towards then we talk about anarchy, where a command and control approach is the best thing, primarily because the two important dimensions of requirements and technology, they are far from agreement, and they are far from certainty as well. So a command and control approach would be the best thing that you should be employing in this at this point in time. Okay. All right, so that's about the waterfall model. Simple and easy, good for executive management control. Primarily, high level of visibility is there from the leadership. Identifies the project requirements from the start. Specific deliverables from each phase, best for short-term projects. So these are the benefits that are there. What are the disadvantages or cons? Requirements needs to be upfront and frozen. Now, this is the biggest problem that we have today. Our requirements are changing. Our requirements are evolving, right? And that is where we talk about agile, we talk about hybrid models, we talk about incremental models, we talk about iterative models. There are so many flavors that have come into the market, right? So it's equally important for us to understand. I'm showing you an example, right? So this is a very widely used image when we talk about the philosophy of iterative and incremental model, right? So when we, if you take a close look at this image, right? So here, when we talk about an iterative model, right? So primarily the goal of the iterative model is to keep working till you get the correct solution. Okay, so refine concepts over time, start with what you know and refine products as you go. Okay, you talk about multiple iterations, you take user feedback, until you get the image right, you talk about an iterative model. Incremental model, primarily, right? If you look at, you are going to deliver in pieces. Okay, you are going to deliver in small pieces, and as time progresses, you will have more visibility, and you are able to deliver the complete project. So when we talk about agile, when we talk about adaptive, when we are going to talk about hybrid models, we are going to look at all these key aspects related to project. Okay, then cannot begin until next step, until current step is over. That's the biggest drawback, right? So you need to go back and complete all of the previous work, agree on the deliverables, agree on the acceptance criteria, uh, and then it becomes easy for you to move forward appropriately into the next phase. And primarily, right, the next important thing here is we cannot go back. We cannot go back into the previous phase. So that is very important. Right. So unable to solve problems until the maintenance phase. That's also a big disadvantage that we have. Okay. Then we talk about the next important technique, which is called the PERT technique, Program Evaluation Review Technique. Okay. Okay. All right. So program evaluation review technique. It's one of the important techniques that is there. So what comes to your mind when you look at this image? It resembles a flow chart. All the work is called out, and most importantly, if you look at the arrows, they point out dependencies, right? So in order to start B, A needs to be completed. In order to start C, A needs to be completed. So A acts as an predecessor to B and C. So we fairly have an understanding about this, right? So PERT, program evaluation review technique, are used to plan the tasks within the project. End of the day, planning, fairly lot of planning has to be done. So how are you going to plan? And planning can be done relatively, right, when you're able to break down the work into typically a flow chart or a network diagram, because this resembles a network. This is also very famously called the network diagram. It makes the scheduling and coordinating team members to accomplish the work easier, because end of the day it is very pictorial. It becomes easy for you to understand how the project work is being organized, and appropriately you can take it forward. It's a graphical illustration of a project as a network diagram consisting of numbered nodes. Okay. Then better activity analysis improves department coordination. Multiple departments are involved. You very clearly understand where the inputs have to come, what are the various steps that you need to follow. And most importantly, it helps you to organize the work in a better way. Okay, resource intensive, you need the required resources, the specific set of resources that are required for you to work on the project. Okay, analysis becomes a little subjective, because you have to get a very comprehensive understanding about the complete scope of work that needs to be focused, and it is also time sensitive. All right. Okay. Then a critical path method, very widely used technique when we talk about PMP, when we talk about schedule management. When we talk about critical path, we will talk about the organizing the whole work into some kind of a sequence, trying to understand what are the dependencies that are there. Okay, we talk about the vocabulary called the predecessor and successor items. It helps you to understand the overall workflow. It helps you to visualize things in a better way. Your activities are more controlled and understood. Primarily, you can identify risks relatively at an early stage, and it becomes easy for you to understand which activities are very important and which should not be delayed in the project. Okay, so yeah, these are some traditional methods that are there as part of project management. All right, so now we'll quickly go back to the, yeah, so the project management body of knowledge, right? So when we talk about the project management body of knowledge, it is referred to as the PMBOK. If you navigate to the PMI site, okay, so if you click on the search tab here, you will find the PMBOK guide here. Okay, I'm just showing you from the live site so that it becomes easy for you to correlate to the landing page on the PMI site as well. So if you click on the project management body of knowledge, this will become the most important study resource for you on the examination, right? So coming back, not exactly a methodology, but it's a guide. It's a guide to project management. It breaks down the entire project management processes into 5 different phases. So as I told you, right, this very famously is very similar to the philosophy of, which was made popular by Sir William Edward Deming, which is called the PDCA cycle. Okay, what does PDCA stand for? PDCA stands for Plan, Do, Check, and Act. Okay, in anything and everything that we do. Okay, as a project manager, in anything and everything that we do, the first important thing is planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Then you flip the plan into action. You move into the execution phase. Then you look at checking. Checking is what is the progress, and what is your plan and what is your actual, and you act is what is your correction, corrective, and preventive action. Right. So this is very famously called the plan to check cycle. Right. So on similar lines, we are going to talk about initiation. Our approach is very structured, organized, so that you don't have any kind of surprises at a later point in time. We talk about initiation, we talk about planning, we talk about execution, we talk about monitoring and control, and we talk about closure. Monitoring and control is an activity that takes place throughout the complete life cycle, and hence it is an ongoing activity. Right? So there are benefits, there are advantages and disadvantages to it. Once we start getting into the thick of things, we'll very clearly articulate on what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and how do we overcome, what are the other methods that are there to overcome those disadvantages that are there. So easy breakdown of project management work, which is very important, right? You are able to decompose the whole work into meaningful chunks, right? Comprehensive approach, well defined, very well defined, well suited to an iterative development environment. So there are some tangible benefits that are there. Project governance is around stakeholders, primarily dealing the expectations of people, treats projects as a single entity. Primarily, right, you will have to take a closer look when you have to manage multiple projects which are similar in nature. We call them as a program. So how do you manage programs? It cannot be done with the same methods, right? So that's very, very important. All right, so then we'll move forward to the next important thing, which is talking about agile, right? So the very philosophy says that we are going to welcome change. So here in the traditional model, we understood that relatively it's going to work very well when the landscape is completely defined. Okay, so just to give you the comparison or the landing page, plan driven versus value driven. So plan driven versus value driven. So this is a very famous slide, and which primarily talks about the major paradigm shift. Okay, the major paradigm shift, your requirements are fixed, right? So which is in a way sometimes it's good. It relatively works well when the landscape is completely defined. But today this has become the biggest bottleneck. Okay, the requirements, they are not fixed. They keep changing, they keep evolving. Our stakeholders are not completely known to us, right? If you take a step back and talk about the power and interest grid, okay, the power and interest grid, a very important aspect, right? So in the very early stages of the life cycle of a project, you don't know who your stakeholders are. Okay, the interest level is very high and the power is very high. You have to manage their expectations very closely. You have to keep them satisfied, right? So sometimes it becomes, in the very early stages, it becomes a little difficult for us to define the complete spectrum of stakeholders who will be involved in the project, right? So that is the biggest disadvantage here. Okay, so your requirements, they remain fixed, and only once you understand all of your requirements, we subsequently move into deriving the number of resources required to work on the project, and then we look at the schedule. So here the scope has to be determined, the scope needs to be known, based on which you will derive the number of resources, okay, the number of resources and the schedule, right? So only once the scope is known, you will be able to determine the resources, and once the scope and resources are known, you will be able to derive the schedule. So that's why we call it as the plan driven. Your plan drives your project, right? But this works well only when your requirements are completely understood, right? But what happens when your requirements are evolving? We just looked at the Stacy diagram, right? What will you do when your requirements are not very clear? So then we will have to adapt. We will have to look at something called an agile model. Okay, so and as the name says, when we talk about agile, you are able to adapt to changes. Okay, you are going to welcome changes even late in development, but end of the day, still I get the bang for the buck, right? So that's a very important aspect that you should be aware of. Okay, a very widely used framework here is the I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this, which is called the Scrum, right? So it's a lightweight process of continuous iterations of development and testing to the project lifecycle. It easily manages complex software and product development using iterative and incremental practices. So here, team, some very enriching images. Rugby game. See, if you look at these images, what comes to your mind? See, some important aspects like very high degree of collaboration. Okay, one team model, right? Like it is, they are very focused towards the goal, and they want to do everything and anything and everything to ensure that the project is successful, right? So if you look at even the name, right? The name, it has come out from the philosophies, right? The rugby game, which is there. So it's a lightweight process of continuous iteration. You're going to run a 30-day sprint, usually 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, and you have a product backlog where we clearly understand what are the various requirements of the stakeholders, right? And when we talk about requirements, we usually talk about something called the must-haves, should-haves, and okay. So that is one way, right? That is one way to primarily look at how do we get to hear from the product owner on what are the various requirements that are there. Okay, so just give me a minute. Must have, should have, and could have. So when we talk about a product, right? When we talk about a product, the product is going to comprise of. So usually, right, this is in context to this image. This where we talk about establishing a backlog. Now, backlog is going to comprise of all those key features that are there. So the must-haves, the most vital things that your product cannot live without, things you consider important but not vital. We talk about could-haves, the nice-to-haves, and the won't-haves, things that provide little or no value, so that you can give up on. So you try to prioritize. Prioritization becomes very important in this rapidly changing world. Okay, now with each of us giving so many options about a specific aspect, activity, or the work that we have to do, it's equally important that we are able to handpick the one which is most relevant, affordable, and which brings value to the table. So there has to be some way in which we are able to prioritize, we are able to empathize, we are able to understand what is the voice of the customer. Okay, that's very, very important, and that is usually done by the product. So primarily, right, two big main methods that we discussed today, which is looking into the plan driven versus the value driven models. All right. Okay, so if you look at the overall certification process, team, introduction to PMI certifications, looking at the what are the various topics that are there, right? For once you enroll with us, because we are almost reaching the top of the hour now. So we have a well-defined roadmap here available. We have access to learning management system. We will give you a comprehensive overview on all the key topics that are there. Okay, starting with how do you create a high performance team? How do you gracefully start the project? How do you flip the plan into action? Failing to plan is planning to fail. How do you start working with the teams, and how do you get the work done? Right, and most importantly, because we are dealing with people, there is every possibility that there will be a lot of conflicts that will be coming into picture. So how are you going to deal with conflicts? Okay, and how are you going to keep the team on track? And most importantly, how are you going to ensure that we are able to create that customer delight and get repeat business from the customer? All this plays a very important role, and our approach is very structured, and we give you access to learning management systems. We give you access to templates, we give you access to study resources, we conduct live scenario based questions, right? So that you are there are two things that are important for us. One is you have the required knowledge to play the role in a better way, and the second important thing is for you to pass the credential. Okay, so once you enroll with us, we will give you a study plan, and if you follow that study plan, please be rest assured that in a maximum of 6 to 8 weeks from the day you register with us, you will be able to pass the certification. And most importantly, we provide complete support on the application process also, because that's a very important step. And many a times, if applications are not filled up correctly, there is every possibility that you get a lot of questions back from PMI and your application is getting rejected. Okay, so please be rest assured that you will be in safe hands. So it will be, learning is going to be fun filled. We will give you access to recordings, access to the instructor 24/7. Learning is guaranteed. All right, so that's about this session, team. Thank you and bye bye.